got Ty Moore here from Socialist Alternative in Minneapolis, doing an interview today for socialistworld.net. Ty, Obama has been in power for nearly a year now. When he first came to power, there was a lot of hopes in his presidency amongst workers and amongst especially the most oppressed in America, ethnic minorities. What's the situation now?
Well, thanks a lot for inviting me to this interview. I mean, it's a critical question. Obama, I think, inspired more hopes in ordinary working people, young people, ethnic minorities than we've seen in any presidential campaign in modern U.S. history, maybe since Kennedy in the early 1960s. But what we've seen happen in the last year is that from approval ratings of over 70% in the first days of his presidency, Obama has seen one of the most precipitous, rapid falls in support of any president in modern history, down to below 50% in the most recent polls. And I think overwhelmingly that has to do with the economic crisis, that despite the headlines about recovery from the point of view of most ordinary workers, what they see is a continuing increase in joblessness, soon to reach over 10%, while Obama has spent, literally trillions of dollars at this point bailing out the banks, ensuring that the, Wall Street barons, see continued profits, and they've received bigger bonuses in 2009 now than they even saw last year. So there's tremendous anger and frustration at what is seen as, a major betrayal, president of the wealthy rather than president of the people. I mean, take the question of, African Americans who, you saw the images in the aftermath of his election of, black people crying and seeing this as, the culmination of the civil rights movement, the mantle of Martin Luther King and other figures of the civil rights establishment that Obama consciously tried to cultivate and make himself appear as a culmination of this process. But as president, he's done virtually nothing. The only time we've seen racism or race issues come up was when a Harvard professor was arrested in his own home by a police officer. And what did Obama do? Obama, after saying it was a stupid action, then apologized to the police officer and attempted to settle it over the beer summit where they sat down at the White House for a beer. Anyway, Obama has actually increased raids on immigrant communities, and there's a growing disillusion that there's a section of black leaders who are looking to, in fact, organize an opposition tendency. So I would say there's been a tremendous disillusionment.
So you mentioned the bailouts of the banks. In the last few months we've been bombarded with propaganda that we're on the road out of the Great Recession. What's the real situation in the US?
Well, from the point of view of ordinary people, it still feels like a deepening recession. Unemployment's up around 10%, and that's official unemployment. In reality, if you count people who are too discouraged to look for work or people who want full-time work but can only find part-time work, we're talking about 15, 18% unemployment rate and rising. The foreclosure crisis is going to be worse in 2009 than it was in 2008, with, I think, over 4 million people expected to lose the total number to lose their homes in the next period. So it's not a recovery from the point of view of most people, but meanwhile, the executives are recording record profits in the banking industry. Bonuses are bigger this year than last year. But I think it's a fragile recovery, and the reality is the potential for a double-dip recession, which will have even more severe and savage impacts on ordinary people, is coming. We look at a city like Detroit, which has faced severest devastation, and we see entire sections of the city overtaken by wildlife. We see there's a skyscraper that is in Detroit where a tree is growing out of the top of it. So you're seeing scenes of complete devastation where sections of U.S. working class communities are now moving into third world conditions even. So it's, they can have whatever headlines they want, Wall Street can post whatever profits they want, but most people aren't feeling it.
So you mentioned about Americans going into third world conditions in some situations. Something that's got a lot of coverage internationally is especially the situation in California.
Well, yeah, California is facing the worst budget crisis in the U.S. right now, but really it's emblematic of what's happening in many, many states, just on a more severe scale. Take the question of education, where students are facing a 33% tuition hike at the University of California system, where mass layoffs are taking place, entire campuses or departments are being threatened with shutdown. And what's particularly exciting about California, though, is there's been a serious fight back that the public sector, the faculty, the university trade unions, and the students organized a one-day strike about a month ago, and more action is taking place, which has the potential to inspire actually national action. The Socialist Alternative in the U.S. is taking the initiative to try and make a March 4th day of actions being planned in California, a national initiative to save public education from the severe budgetary attacks that are happening across the country.
In America, there are more than 45 million people without health care. One of the big debates in America is Obama's healthcare reforms program. What will this program mean?
Well, I mean, it has been an accumulating crisis. It's not only a question of the 45 or 50 million uninsured, but it's also even a question of millions who are insured don't have adequate access and are facing massive monthly payments just to receive this healthcare coverage. Personal bankruptcy is at an all-time high in the U.S. for the last several years, and healthcare costs are the #1 cause of bankruptcy. And it's actually not the uninsured who are mainly facing bankruptcy. It's people who are insured and yet their insurance is not covering the costs when they face emergencies or catastrophic events. So Obama's, both the Democrats and the Republicans recognized they needed to pass some sort of healthcare legislation. This was to be Obama's signature issue. But the bill that just passed the House a few weeks ago and is now going through the process in the Senate, fundamentally will not solve the problems. It's actually a bill that's been written predominantly by the insurance companies themselves, and it's going to represent a massive subsidy of hundreds of millions of dollars to the insurance companies. Now, through a certain degree of subsidization, many of the uninsured currently will receive health insurance. A majority of them will. But it's going to be the most anemic, useless in many ways health insurance, where they'll still be, to get most of the coverage most people need, they'll still have to pay exorbitant co-payments and other such things. The Democrats are going to, call this a huge victory for working people when it finally passes through the Senate. But the architects of this bill, Max Baucus, the chair of the powerful Senate Finance Committee, that was the main committee that drew up the bill, he received 25% of his campaign contributions from the healthcare industry. Obama himself received $18 million in his campaign from the healthcare industry, more than any president in U.S. history. The healthcare industry actually donated more to the Democrats than the Republicans in this last race, indicating their trust that the Democratic Party would do nothing to confront them. And the severe irony of the situation is the people who are responsible for the healthcare crisis, the insurance companies, that see over 40,000 people die every year as a result of lack of health insurance. That's according to Harvard Medical School. They're the ones who drew up the bill and are going to be benefiting most from this. Now, the main solution to this, a single-payer, universal healthcare system like most European countries or Canada enjoys, was put off the table as not even an option for debate, even though a majority of Americans, 54%, the most recent poll, say they support a single-payer option. So, Socialist Alternative actually rejects this new bill and says, the only real solution is getting rid of the insurance companies and putting forward a single-payer universal healthcare system.